I am Peter Richgate, and today I am doing a screencast over machine learning and specifically looking at data sets and trying to kind of just go through them, or this specific one related to horror movies. So hopefully the screencast isn't as scary as an actual horror movie in terms of its output, but we shall see. Anyways, I'll just give everyone a quick look as to the data set I'm going to be using today. So we're going to be looking at one from Tidy Tuesday. This was created in 2022, so it's got a bunch of different things going on. Down here we got all of our different variables, what they all mean. As you can see, they got release date, name of the movie, runtime, what kind of genre it is, revenue, budget, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's just jump right in and get started. So here's what I plan to investigate. We're going to be trying to find out the top 10 most popular horror movies by popularity and revenue. In fact, let me just change that real quick. We're going to be looking at how horror movie franchises have done, seeing if there's any difference in if it's a good one, if it performs better at the box office or by the viewer, based on movie one, two, three, if it gets better or worse. And then finally, we're just going to look at the overall decade or specific decades of how horror movies have changed by popularity and revenue. I'm looking at these two just because I think they're both good indicators. One, just because the general fan base might support the movie more than the box office, and vice versa. So we're just going to compare the two among all three of the things I investigate just to kind of get a different glance at all the things we're looking at. And then particularly based on my learning from Stat 251, we're going to be working with strings, kind of just making identifying which movies are horror movies as opposed to other ones, and just kind of trying to find out which ones we need to look at specifically. We're going to reshape the data that way it looks a bit more organized and a bit better for other people that want to work with this kind of data and try to find different answers for questions they might have. We're going to be looking at dates and times. I have examples here of what we're trying to do here, so I guess that explains that a little bit. But that dates and times thing is gonna kind of look at what we're trying to do in terms of how movies have changed by decade. And then finally, another topic I'll be implementing today is the visualizing data. So we're going to be using what we've learned and trying to visualize it for everyone to see. So without further ado, I'll just go ahead and we can just get started here. So first things first, uh, we need to get our packages in that are going to help us all do this. So we're just going to start coding here. All right, we're going to get into our libraries here. Read R, that's going to help us read in that data set that is currently a link at the moment. And then we're going to do tidyverse. This provides a bunch of different functions that are going to allow us to work with what we need to. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this real quick. Don't want to spoil it just yet. All right, and then dplyr, that's going to help us reshape some of this data furthermore. And then we're also going to put in ggplot. That's going to help us visualize that data. I'm also going to implement cowplot, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the end here. And then library articulate. All right, this is going to help us with some functions that we're going to need to later. And then finally, our last one, as of right now, is going to be this lubridate package. This is going to be really important for that dates and times section. So we'll just go in and get started. All right, so here we go. We need to get in our data set so we can get going. So I'm just going to call it right now horror movies. All right, and then we're going to use the function read.csv parenthesis, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this link just like that. Stick it right in there, and let's get this going. It's going to load in all those packages, and as you can see right here, We got our horror movies loaded, and as mentioned before, it's got the title of each movie. It's got the language even, gives a little overview, a tagline, something to get the audience a little scared. We got our release dates. We got popularity, vote count, or the average, the budget of each movie, the revenue of each movie, the runtime in just minutes, which I'll work with later, uh, released versus in production or even unreleased. Adult, this is refers to uh, if the movie is, I guess, adult content, which if it's rated R, um, it isn't actually listed here, so I'm not entirely sure because it's all false, so we won't really be working with that. And then we got our genre names here. Just lists out what kind of movie it is, and then collection. So this is going to be that franchise thing I was talking about. So if it's in a collection, it's got a number associated with it, and if it doesn't, it's going to be NA along with the collection name here. So let's just go ahead and get back to working with that data. So we're just going to start a new code block here. All right, and then here we go. All right, so we need to start with getting our data ready to go. So I'm just going to make a little note here, setting up our data, just so we have a good reference for us. All right, and now here's what we're going to do. We're going to convert the runtime. As mentioned, it's just in minutes right now. As you can see here, it's just in minutes. It doesn't give an hour or anything. So let's go ahead and get that going. So here's what we're going to do. All right. So we're going to start by doing horror movies. Get our data set in there. And then this $sign, and we're gonna create a new column. So we're going to call this hours to show how many hours are in the movie. So I'm going to do horror movies, $sign again. We're going to look at that runtime column. And then we're going to work with that. And then we're going to make this 60. Make that equivalent to 60 minutes. All right. And then horror movies. And then we're going to call this one minutes. Whoops. All right. Just to show how many minutes are going to be left in that movie for us. So we're just going to do horror movies again. And then look at that runtime one more time. And boom, boom. All right, and then another 60. And then we're going to call this horror movies $sign duration. All right, and then I'm going to do the sprint f function. This is going to get our hours and minutes for each movie. It's going to put them into new columns for us. So the way to do that is going to be %02 D, and then I'm just going to do that again, %02D. All right, comma, and then we're going to look at our new columns that we're looking at. So horror movies, and then hours, and then horror movies, minutes. Whoops, if I can type. All right, let's see what we can do here. All right, boom. So if we go back to our chart, at the very end here, it's got hours, minutes, and then it's got the actual time listed out, so it's a bit easier to read. So that is all fine and dandy. All right, so now we are going to want to look at something else to do with our data. So we're going to be filtering for just horror movies. And you might be like, why are we doing that? Isn't this whole data set horror movies? You're not entirely wrong. It is horror movies uh, in this data set, but as you can see here, if we're looking at all these names, we got horror thriller, we got comedy horror, action, comedy, fantasy. So it's got a lot of different genres in there, but we're looking for just horror. Um, it's going to be easier for us. Also, we want to make sure that these are, and for me personally, I want to make sure that these are all kind of horror movies. So I'm looking for a horror that's going to be in the first genre listed here, strictly just to make sure that we're covering all our bases. And I understand that horror might be in other movies, and it might have not have that genre name to it, but we just want to make sure that we have the best of the best, I guess. So we're gonna make a new uh, thing here. So I'm gonna call this horror movies filtered because we're gonna be filtering out for just those movies here. So we're gonna use the separate function here, and then we're gonna look at horror movies, our original data set, and then we're gonna be looking at that column genre names. All right, and then we're going to be putting them into different columns here. So if we look here, we're going to put them into what I'm going to call genre 1, genre, genre score, I need to put quotes around this. Whoa, okay. And let's try this again. And then we're going to look at genre 3. All right. We're going to close that, and then the way we're going to do this is we're going to separate it by and then comma. The reason we do this is because if we're looking at the genre names, you can see that they're all separated by commas. So that's what we're going to want to separate by here. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that. It's going to give us a little error warning, but if we look at our new data set that R created for us, as you can see, we got genre 1, 2, 3, and it's going to have NA for those that don't have an extra genre 2 or genre 3, but we're not really too worried about that right now. All right, now we're going to go make this a bit more concise just to eliminate all those genres that we're not looking at, like the comedy and adventure or action and things like that. So we're going to use that same data set we just made. All right, and now we're going to select. We're using the select function to select the specific genre horror movies, and you want that to be first in, so all the horror movies in genre 1. So we're going to be looking at that filtered. All right, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to subtract the columns we just made. All right, boom, and then boom, genre 3. And then one other thing while we're doing the select function, as you saw before, at the very end, we have our hours and minutes column along with our duration, but we don't really need hours and minutes if we have this new duration column. And similarly with, let's see, runtime, we don't really need those columns. So for the purposes of using the separate function for that first time here, I'm just going to knock those out right away while we're thinking about it. So we're going to knock that off, subtract hours, and then I'm going to subtract minutes. Boom. All right. Now let's run this code real quick. Run selected line. Boom. And if we look at our new table, at the very end, just as the duration, we got rid of. Oh, we still have genre 3. Oh, I didn't put that there. All right, now let's run this one more time. Okay, error in select. Well, that's not great. You know what? Let's just run this code all again because it probably thinks still in there when it shouldn't be. So we're just gonna hit this button, it reruns everything. Boom, got that error message, doesn't matter. If we look back again at our data set, our new one, the filtered, whoops, particularly that filtered one, as you can see, it just has genre 1, and the duration, it got rid of the hours, minutes column and that runtime column, which is what we're looking for. All right, now we are going to be looking at just, as you probably saw, it still has adventure, comedy, action, fantasy, so we want to knock those out. We just want to look at the first thing. When you think of the movie, it's going to be horror. So we need to filter out the columns that don't need the other genres. So we're going to start again with horror movies filter, and then we're going to filter again. So actually, we're just going to restart this data set, and this pipe function is going to allow us to do this well. So we're going to use a filter statement and then grepl. This is going to grab basically anything that says horror, so that knocks out everything else, and we're going to be looking at genre 1 because that's the column that has all the theme or genres in it, and then ignore dot case equals all caps true. Perfect. So what this does is it's just grabbing all the horror movies from column genre 1. So if I run this code real quick, perfect. It knocked down our observations to 19,339. So if we just look at that again, and our column genre 1, boom, just horror, just what we're looking for. So off to a good start there. All right, now what else are we looking for? Now we need to all right, 1 second, let me just figure out all that we're doing here. All right, so now, as we mentioned before earlier, one of the things we want to do is look at horror movie franchises, right? So if you look at our new data set, it's got uh, numbers and it's got NA. Now, that might help, but we just want simple, is it a collection or is it not? So let's just go ahead and get that started, just so we have a clean data set, nothing too crazy. So if we use our same data set, we've been using that filtered one. I'm going to use the arrow, look at our boom, another pipe, perfect. Now we're going to mutate. We're going to use a mutate statement, collection, perfect. And we're going to use this ifelse function. And what this is going to do, it's going to look at basically, is it or is it not a part of a collection or a franchise? So we're going to use that collection column before, boom. All right. And we're going to be looking at just no, is it one or is it not? And yes, it is one. So parenthesis, let's see if this will work. Run the selected line, ran perfectly. All right. Let's go back to our data set and boom, it's got yes or no. It's a lot better than NA or a number. You know, we don't really want to work with that number, so we're just working with that string. Making sure that everything looks good. Yes, no, perfect. So we like to see that. All right, now that we've got that all done, it's time to start visualizing this data, making sure that it all, it gets the results that I try to or want to investigate here. So let's just get that going. So we're going to start a new code block here. All right, and now we're going to be looking at that top 10 most popular horror movies, and we're going to do it by both popularity and revenue. So in order to do that, let's just look at our popularity. We just want to do that and nothing else too much. So we're going to do an arrange statement here. All right, and we're going to look at our filtered data set here. All right, and then we're going to want to do by popularity. All right, popularity, boom, boom. All right, let's get this going. Perfect. And if you look here, it's got popularity, and it's got the most popular movies from top to bottom here. Put that descending there because we want to look at the top 10. So in order to do this, we're going to make a new kind of data set out of the one we just made, and we're going to call it top 10 popular. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do head, and then of popularity, which did that descending function for us. And then we're just going to comma and 10, and that's going to give us our top 10 here. So if we run this, perfect. It's got our top 10 top 10 horror movies based off popularity here, which is good for us. All right. Now let's go ahead and visualize that data. So we're going to do ggplot, which I mentioned before. All right, and then we're going to look at our top 10 popular data. and then AES, boom. And then on the x-axis, we're going to have our title. Oops. Title of the movie. Y is going to be popularity. Perfect. All right. And then, oops. Oh my goodness. Okay. And then we're going to do column. Whoop. We're going to do this by columns just so it looks easier to read. And then plus, we're going to do a chord flip. This is going to put it's going to flip the x and y coordinates for us, parenthesis, and then we're also going to add this theme minimal. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it a little bit more pleasurable to look at. And then we need to add our labels. So we're going to do title equals, and let's just call it top 10 horror movies based by popularity. Perfect. And then we're also going to want an x-axis. So we're just going to call this movie. And then y-axis is going to be called popularity. Close parentheses. Now let's just run this. And boom. We got our top 10 horror movies based by popularity. So now we want to look at revenue. So if we just go back down here, we're going to do the same thing we did before. So we're going to do revenue. We're going to do an arrange statement. We're going to look at horror movies filtered. And then we're going to descend by that revenue. Boom, boom. So if we run this, perfect. And it's got our top 10 revenues. So if we go here, we can see that it's got all the revenues from top to bottom, which is what we're looking for. And then same as before, I'm just going to do top 10 revenue. And then, because we're just looking at the top 10 movies that gain the most revenue, so we're going to run that again. And looky here, we got our top 10 movies based off revenue. So now we're going to do the same thing as before, just to kind of see the differences between the two. So we're going to look at that top 10 revenue we just did. AES, this is going to give us what variables we're using. So we're going to do title, and then Y equals revenue, boom, boom, plus, same as before, we just want to look at columns, make it nice and easy to read, plus, we're going to flip the coordinates, boom, and then add that theme minimal again. So we're going to add that. And then finally, same as before, just want to add some labels just so this chart is a bit easier to follow. So I'm just going to call it top 10 horror movies based by popularity. Boom. X label, we're going to do movie, and then Y is going to equal that revenue. All right, let's look. What do we got? Perfect. So we got our revenue. That's looking nice and dandy for us. So now we can compare, but it's a little difficult to compare, right? Because we have two different charts, and it's not really easy to kind of compare them both at once if you have to run two different codes. So, as mentioned before, this library cow plot allows us to actually put two chart or plots in the same frame here. So the way to do that is after I ran that package here, we're gonna label both of these plots. So I'm gonna call this top, or I'm gonna call this let's call it top 10 popular chart. Boom. All right, and then same here, top 10 revenue chart. So the way you're going to plot both of these in the same little frame here is we're going to do the function plot grid. All right, and then we're going to use our two charts. So I'm going to do top 10 popular charts, and then we're going to look at top 10 revenue charts. And then let's just run this and I'll show you guys what we're looking at. So if I run, or actually, let me just run this whole thing. Boom. So it's got this, but as you can tell, really clunky, kind of hard to figure out what's going on. The titles are, clashing against each other. The x-axis is just impossible to read. So what we're going to do is we're going to add n call equals 1, and that should give us something a bit better to look at. And as you can see here, it splits the movies up, or the two popularity. Oh, whoops, I gave it the same name. Let's not do that. That would definitely be confusing. All right, let's run this one more time. All right, here we go. So as you can see here, we got our two different charts. Very easy to read. Popularity is at the bottom, movies on the side. Same for revenue, that's at the bottom, movies on the side. And as you can tell, there's actually quite a bit of difference between the two charts. So as you can see here, Orphan First Kill is by far the most popular horror movie in this data set. Pretty strange. Like I mentioned before, I eliminated movies that had different genres or had things other than horror in it because we're looking solely for that horror experience. Don't want anything else. Don't need to be thrilled. Don't need to laugh. Just looking for something scary to watch. So that basically is where Orphan First Kill kind of takes charge, really, followed by Smile here in second, but nowhere near close to the Orphan here. And then you got your other movies that are pretty popular, but nothing too crazy. And then if we look at revenue, it looks like The Exorcist is by far the most highest grossing movie based on revenue. Granted, it did come out, I think, 50 years ago. Yeah, 1973. So we've got half a century here for it to make some money. So I guess that might be why it leads the charge. However, all the other movies differ. So the movies based off popularity are a lot different than those based off revenue. So really interesting to see here. Kind of cool to compare. As you can see, The Exorcist is made well over, my eyes don't deceive me, 400 million. Um, and as you can tell, a lot of the movies, at least from my knowledge, appear to be a lot more recent in the revenue column as opposed to this popularity one where some of these movies I've never even heard of before. A couple of them, obviously, but not all of them. These are pretty standard. These are part of a franchise. Same with that. So pretty easy to tell what's changed in the horror movie business, I guess. So pretty cool to see. But let's look at some other things that might give us a clue about horror movies. So as mentioned before, the next thing I would like to investigate is how have horror movie franchises, how have they performed, both in popularity and revenue. It's an interesting, it's something I thought would be interesting to see because, the idea the sequel is never better than the original. I'd like to kind of put that to the test here in this little screencast I'm doing for you. So we're going to be looking at that collections. Remember, let me get rid of all these here. If I just go strictly to my horror movies filter one. So we're going to be looking at if it is part of a collection or franchise or if it isn't. So personally, we're going to be looking at all the ones that say yes. So let's just go ahead and dive right in real quick. All right, so we're just going to call this collections. Nothing too fancy, just something easy for us to follow. So we're going to be looking at that horror movies filtered again. And then using that pipe. And then we're going to do our filter here. So let's see, we're going to do collection name. We're going to be filtering by collection name. So what kind of franchise is it, or what franchise is it actually? And this function this is going to allow us to select the ones we want to look at. So personally, I'm going to be looking at the ones that I think are the most popular. Uh, it you don't want to you don't want to go off. I didn't really want to go off the popularity based off the data set we used here. I just kind of wanted to use my own knowledge. I did a little research online as well, and I also didn't want to include every single collection because it would get a little messy, and we're just kind of looking at kind of the ones that stand out from the rest here. So I'm going to be looking at the following. We're going to be looking at, whoops, hold on. We're going to be looking at the paranormal activity collection. And the way I got that is just real quick. If I go over to, if I go down here, paranormal activity collection, that's how I'm getting that name. And then we're going to be looking at an oldie but a goodie, the Friday the 13th collection. Boom. We're also going to be looking at Saw, a popular franchise. Let's see what else. We're going to be looking at this. Whoops. We're going to be looking at the Scream collection. All right. What else do we got? Halloween, one that's made its revival in the last few years here. So we're just going to see how they've done. All right. And then The Conjuring, that's been a popular franchise as well. Conjuring collection. And then one more kind of oldie but goodie here, A Nightmare on Elm Street. And this gives us a good range of all the different franchises based off their decade and whatnot. So, um, yeah, so parenthesis, close that, and let's run this. Perfect. So now you've got 43 observations, and it's just got all those collections we filtered for, which is perfect. All right, perfect. All right, now let's see here. I'm gonna call this collections popularity. And now I'm just gonna get the charts going. So I'm just gonna call this collections popularity. And same as before, instead of just making a ggplot, oh my goodness, instead of just making a ggplot, I'm just gonna actually label the ggplot something. That way we can compare the two like we did before. So ggplot, we're gonna use that collection set we just used. AES X. We're gonna call this release date. Now the reason we're gonna do that is because we want to look at how the movies have done in terms of popularity based on the release date, how things have changed over time. So now we're going to be looking at y equals popularity. Boom. All right, and then we're gonna add a color. That way the movie franchise stands out. So I'm just gonna put color. I'm just gonna use the collection name, for example, whether it's paranormal activity or Friday the 13th. So just collection name. Boom, boom. I'm gonna use this plus. We're gonna add geom line. We're gonna make this a line chart. That way we can follow it like a line. And then let's see here. And then we're gonna add our title. So let's do GG title. All right, and then I'm gonna do horror movies, horror movie franchises by popularity. Close parenthesis, and then we're gonna add that theme minimal just to give it a nice little look. All right, let's see. I think that's gonna be everything. So I'm just gonna run that, make sure it works. And it does. Perfect. All right, now we're gonna do the same thing with revenue. So I'm just gonna make a new chart, collections, revenue. All right, so we're just gonna do the same thing before, ggplot, collections. And I could copy and paste this, but I think it's just easier to type it all out. So I'm going to do release date as our X, see that change over time, Y equals revenue, color equals collection, underscore name, let's see, parenthesis, plus, make that a line chart, boom, boom. and then GG title. And we're going to call this Horror Movie Franchises by Revenue. Perfect. And then one last time, theme underscore minimal. Give us the good look. Whoops. And let's run this, make sure it runs smoothly. It does. And now we can do the same thing as before. We're just going to plot that grid. So plot grid. All right. Plot grid collections, popularity, collections, revenue. And once again, I'm going to add that M column just to give our two plots some room to breathe. So if we run this, we got ourselves. I am back. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty that took longer than the 45 to 50 minute threshold that this assignment is requiring of us. So I thought I'd just do my thing off the mic here, but I got it locked and loaded, and if we load it now, as you can see, I've got it loaded so we can look at both the revenue and popularity side by side, as well as all the collections here. And the color indicates which collection it is. So if we're looking at the Halloween one, for example, you can see it started off in the late 70s, kind of tailored off, and then had a huge uprising back in early 2020s, and I guess the most recent movie flopped. And each point where the line stops is where a movie started. So, for example, it's not like it was always decreasing popularity or revenue in this case. And even looking at that Halloween collection again, you can see it had a huge spike because I guess they had the remake, and then the sequel for that went down the toilet, to put it lightly. A lot of interesting trends, more or less similar. If you look at the Scream collection, it grew in popularity, but revenue was kind of the same. If we look at what color is this? This is the I think, what color is that? I can't even, colorblind. Paranormal Activity, yeah. Um, huge uh grossing budget because it was popular. Second one came out, people wanted to see it, and then the third was like, who cares? And then it got worse and worse. So that's comparing that. So now I can get into the last two things I wanted to look at here. Um, we're going to be working with those dates and times again, just making sure that we can look at each uh, decade here. Um, so yeah, let's just jump right into it. I'm gonna call this horror movies decades. All right, and we're gonna be looking at that thing we looked at before, horror horror movie filter. Perfect. We're gonna use that pipe, and then this is where we're gonna start getting into this is where we're gonna start getting into the dates and times deal. So we're gonna mutate, release, year. We're gonna just look at the year here, and then we're gonna put year equals as dot date. We're gonna look at that release date because we're trying to make a new column called the release year. Let's just make sure I got all that covered. All right, boom. All right, well, we don't want that, so we're gonna do a comma. Let's call this decade equals paste 0, release, release year, and then we're gonna call this parentheses slash, or excuse me, percentage. Oh my goodness, I can't type. Percentage slash percentage. If I can even type. There's a lot of different things going on there. 10, and then we're gonna multiply by 10 because that's a decade. And then we're gonna do boom. 1, I'm gonna add that S at the end, that way it's a full decade here. If we look at our new Data sets, we are looking at decades and it's a release year. So it's got 2020s and then all the way down 2010s, so on and so forth, which is perfect. So now we're just going to look and create a couple more charts here. Popularity, boom, ggplot, more movies, decades, AES. AES, we're going to do X equals decades, Y equals popularity. And then we're going to do the plus, and we're going to add our GM column again. Boom, plus theme, minimal, whoops, plus, we're going to add our labels here. So, boom, oops, title equals, horror movies by popularity for each decade. Boom. All right. And then we're going to do X equals, oh my goodness, movie? No, we're going to do X equals, uh, we're going to do X equals month, and then Y equals popu. Oh, excuse me, I don't know why I put month. My apologies, it's going to be decade. I'm getting a lot of things mixed up right now, but now we should be good. Popularity, boom, and then so we should be good there. And then just for the sake of time, I'm just gonna copy and paste it because it's basically the same thing for the revenue, and don't really want to sit around farting around about the same kind of deal. It's just a different thing we're looking at. And then once again, we're going to be looking at that plot grid using that cow plot function. We're going to do decade popularity and then decade revenue. N call equals 1, so we get some nice space. And let's just run this all, and we got an error. Decade's not found. You want to know why? Because I believe it is decade is what we're calling it. And that is a silly error by me. And now we're looking at our metrics here. So if we look at decade, as you can see in the popularity, it's horror movies have really boomed in the 2020s, but that could be due to social media and such, followed by 2010s, 2000s. Interesting to note that the 80s had a stronger prevalence than the 90s. I guess horror movies back in the 90s were not as good. And then if we're looking at revenue, oh my goodness, because I copy and pasted, this is the fear I had before. It did not I did not see that I needed to put revenue. So look, now we got revenue, and I need to change this again because I copy and pasted, which is something that shortcuts are good in theory, but never great in execution. But now we're good to go, revenue, popularity, so we can see the difference. Um, and yeah, this looks all good. So basically, just to kind of uh, go over everything we have covered. So just to summarize, we looked at the top 10 most popular horror movies based on popularity and revenue. We then looked at how, oh, let me just run this real quick. We looked at horror movie franchises by popularity and revenue, seeing if there's any difference in the big major ones. And as you can tell, there are some differences. And then finally, we just looked at the collection of horror movies by popularity and revenue for each decade, seeing if there's any trends, anything new that we should expect for the upcoming rest of the decade. But yeah, so overall, that concludes everything I attempted to investigate. Thank you for watching, and yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time. See ya.